I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking.
Where are
So,
you located?
I'm located in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. Oh, great. I've been to Puerto Rico. I
You
went
have
there. I went there for a science fiction convention.
science fiction convention. What year?
I think it was about 2017, I think.
That I think I think I know which one it is, but I would need to check because I know I remember I went to a convention that was like full science fiction. I think around that exact same year. So I really don't remember.
I think it's the same one because they don't have big science fiction conventions in Puerto Rico too often. And the reason it was there that year was because they had the major science fiction where they give out the Hugo Award. They had that in Helsinki, which I went to.
Okay.
And so they have a local one to make up for that for all the Americans and North American people, and they had it that year in Puerto Rico. So I think we're talking about the same event.
Okay, probably yeah. It was it by any chance? Was this called StarCon?
I can't remember now.
Yeah, that's the one that I remember. But hey, probably I did get to see you there. I was in that convention, but I was working with a small business in that convention. So Walter, today we're going to be talking about arcades and love songs, the Ballad of Walter Day. Um, an amazing documentary of your career and now your new endeavor that you've always wanted to um to experiment, that it's music. Now, during the documentary, you mentioned that the songs came to you, that you had them and that you listened to them. How was that feeling when you got to like listen and hear all these songs?
Well, in 1985, I had a glamorous girlfriend who one night called me up and said, Walter, I secretly have been seeing a friend of yours, and I've fallen for him, and I wanted to be free to be with him. So within like a week or 10 days, the heartbreak began to plug in, and I began to feel incredibly well. If you've ever gone through heartbreak, you know what it can be like. It was a very awful experience. And about a week after that, the music started playing. It was almost like I was listening, channeling a radio station inside me. What I thought were to me, they were beautiful songs with harmonics, harmonies, melodies, lyrics, hooks, and stuff like this. Some of them almost completely finished, and it just went on and on. And it was a very emotional experience that literally would grip my body. When a certain song might play, I'd feel it all over my body. It was a very physiological thing hearing that music and I started falling in love with the songs, and I started recording them in the tape recorders and writing the music down, and they were just coming out of the thin air. It was 138 of them came out before the phenomena ended, and I vowed, even though I wasn't a singer and I had no interest or any intention of ever becoming a singer, I vowed that someday I was going to get up on the stage and I was going to sing those songs, and people would hear this beautiful music I was hearing. So the years went on. 20 years later, The King of Kong was filmed. And I talked openly to the producers about how much I wanted to retire from video games and actually produce this music I was hearing. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll play us the music. So I did. So a whole bunch of the songs are actually in The King of Kong, where acoustically on the guitar, acoustic guitar, I'm playing and singing some of the songs. And later on, the producers of The King of Kong said, you know, Walter, out of all the people who were in that movie, King of Kong, we were the most fascinated by your story of all the people. 20 years after that, I'm standing in a video game event, and some people come out of the crowd who they were wealthy people who had created a successful video game called Color Switch.
Hmm.
And they recognized me from the King of Kong, and they said, "Well, Walter, we're curious. Whatever happened with that music?" And I told them it was still something I had to produce, but I just had never been able to do it. And they, on the spot, decided that they would use their successful wealth to actually produce, as a gift for me, with no strings attached, my record and produce a 10-song record. So that's what started happening. I started going in the studio and producing the music. Somehow, the producers of The King of Kong from 20 years ago learned that Walter was finally coming out with his album, and they thought, my God, what a great story about how a man in his 70s never gave up his dream and proved that it was never too late to fulfill your life and bring your heart's desire out and share it to the world. And that's how this movie happened.
That's amazing. And Walter, I wanted to ask because throughout the film you had a lot of like different endeavors. You had a major collection of newspapers, then you went to another collection, and from there you got to video games. What got you so interested into the video game industry back in those times when it was not that big as it is right now in age?
Well, I used to sell old newspapers. Actually, old newspapers from like 1820 and 1790. I'd sell them to history teachers and collectors. So I did that as a business for a while, but I stopped doing that because in my hometown of Fairfield, Iowa, out of the 10,000 people that are here, over 4,000 of them practice transcendental meditation. And transcendental meditation is something you sit down in a chair and do it for 20 minutes in the morning, then you do it 20 minutes later in the day. But it has a direct effect on your creative intelligence and how much mental potential you're able to unfold. So I had this orientation already to be very interested in people's full mental potential. When I
Okay.
started playing video games and fell in love with them, I became intrigued by the champions of the video game world. Like, what is it that they have going for themselves that make them better than everybody else? They can rise above the crowd and get the highest scores that show on eye-hand coordination, mind-body coordination, higher energy level, creative thinking. So I was intrigued by what it was that made the champions who they are. Like who make like what is it that makes Billy Mitchell, stuff like
Mhm.
that. So I had this orientation already because transcendental meditation is famous for unfolding full mental potential and clarity of creative intellect and everything like that. So I started monitoring high scores on video games, and I started a scoreboard at my arcade called Twin Galaxies. And just by a stroke of divine luck or karma, the video game industry recognized in 1982 my scoreboard as the official scoreboard for the whole world. And we started organizing rules and creating contests and organizing just processes for submitting scores so that we united all the arcades in the world that were aware of us, that is, into a global esports arena. And that was the beginning of esports. It was the arcade version of esports. However, it was the beginning of we were the first esports organization in history. And that's why Twin Galaxies is so historically important because that's why people call me the father of esports because I initiated the first esports organization 40 some years ago before the big things began to go on today.
Walter, how I comes to my curiosity, how would you receive like the scores for players that are that were uh, out of your region?
Okay, here's how that happened. It was a long process to learn how to verify scores, and it was not easy to do because as time went on, the people would submit false scores and stuff like that. At first, we would have the arcades mail in through the mail, U.S. Postal or whatever. They
Hmm.
were coming from other countries too. We'd have them send in photographs of the screen that showed the final score, and also have an affidavit signed by witnesses and signed by the arcade management. And that's how we would do it at first. That didn't work out too well because someone could cheat. They could lie about their scores, and the arcade could lie with them, so they get publicity for having a high score champ there. So later we had people start videotaping uh,
Okay.
scores, and then we had a big library of videotape VHS tapes of people's gameplay. And still, there were games that had cheats or codes in them that people could cheat on, so it made it even more complicated. Eventually, it evolved to the point where there's lots and lots of I'm not connected to the Twin Galaxies anymore, and they have very advanced protocols in place for having a score get analyzed by other champions who verify that yes, we'll sign off on this, this is an accurate, this is a legitimate, verifiable score, and we accept this as being a valid world record. So it was a long, long process that stretched across decades, actually.
That's amazing. And wanted to continue on with this topic. How does it feel that a lot of people are mentioning you that you are the father of esports? And as well, how do you feel that the fact that you are the father of esports, that what you started has become a multi-million dollar industry?
Well, it's the industry's definitely worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I think I think that what I engineered at the very beginning was just the inspirational first step. The inspirational first step. For instance, do you know that the Mississippi River begins on someone's farm as a little trickle of water up on someone's, and it's way up in northern Minnesota? And Twin Galaxies was like the beginning of the Mississippi River. It was a
Okay.
little trickle that was just the first step of inspiration of what could become big. And all the players who gathered around Twin Galaxies back in 1982, when we had that famous photograph for Life magazine, if you remember that, there was a famous photograph where everybody's posing on the street behind their
Yeah.
game. Okay, all those players, they all say today, not with regret, but with amazement, they say, we believed in electronic sports just as much as the people do today that are making millions of dollars, but we were just born too early. They had the same spirit, the same devotion to it, the same belief in it, the same inspiration and excitement about becoming professional video game players as our modern generation does. It's just that they were born as pioneers back before the technology could support it, and back before the culture would support it and promote it, and back before the sponsors would come in there and put billions of dollars or whatever it is behind organized competitive video game playing. So even though it was old arcade games, and even though it's modern internet and intranet kind of stuff, it was the same thing. They were devoted, competitive, professional gamers.
That's amazing. And Walter, when when the people from Color Switch gave you the great news of doing your record, how did you feel when you entered that recording studio for the first day of your session?
I remember turning to the I remember feeling like I was finally home. And and when I stood there singing, it's was so happy that I realized that this is what I wanted to do. So it was an incredible thing. And of course, uh, I think a lot of singers have the worry that am I good enough? Because it was an amazing process because I learned from my performance on the stage that night that my voice can develop and I can have a singing voice. And because all the doubts that had preceded that finally were beginning to fall away because it was just a question of work. One thing that I'm disappointed in is I'm disappointed that I realize how much work it's going to take to actually have a great singing voice because I don't know at the age of 75 if I want to work that hard, you know?
Okay. But after this record, do you have plans to continue producing your other songs? You mentioned that the record has 10 songs. There is more than 100. Is there any future to see other songs being produced?
Oh yeah, I absolutely am on fire. I'm already beginning to select the songs and making sure that the lyrics are finished for another 10 songs because I would like to do numerous more albums and have as many of the songs actually brought to life as I can.
That's amazing. And are are there any out of the 100 songs that you have, do you have any that are like very, very important to you?
Well, there's some songs that I consider more beautiful than others because when I hear my music, I actually hear orchestrations inside. I just don't hear a single melody. I hear lots of orchestrations inside. And some of them to me are harmonically so beautiful that I really hope I can get them out and have people hear them the same way I hear them. It's a very, very challenging process because of the 10 songs that we did already with our local studio. None of them sound exactly as I hear them inside. I think other artists have reported that also, that it's hard to capture what they're hearing inside when they produce some songs. And that's what I'm faced with now. Can I bring the songs out as beautiful as I hear them inside? But I have a bunch I do want to do.
Okay, that's great. Is there any chance, or has there been any moment, being the fact that you have, there is a scene in the documentary that you like retire 100% to like be the official person of like the arcade scene of video games, but being the fact that there are still events going on, for Tetris and between and other games in different ways, there's still a big events. Have you ever been approached to like, make an appearance or make a comeback to one of
Well,
these big events?
well, here's what happened. Um, when they honored me as the father of esports, I thought this is the best place to symbolically do my best to cut ties with the past and focus on this future endeavor as a performing musician and singer. And so I was very pleased that I symbolically surrendered my shirt and gave up the ghost and turned the baton over to future generations to carry on what I had done for all those decades. And so that moment. And that's what that moment was attempting to capture. And I think it did reasonably good. That I would surrender there, give up symbolically my shirt, and pass the baton on so that everything I'd ever done could now be taken over by future generation, and they would run with it and make the best out of it that they could. However, the functional reality is that because of the status of the father of esports, I just did an event in Milwaukee where I did have to put a referee shirt on, Laura. And I didn't keep score and I didn't work as the scorekeeper or the referee, but I just signed autographs. So
Okay,
that's,
Walt.
in fact, there's about four more that are scheduled now. People are scheduling. For some people, they're scheduling the movie and my appearance at different video game events. That was something I didn't foresee coming, but it seems to be what's happening.
That's amazing. And Walter, this would be my final question for you today. If you could describe this documentary with one word, what would it be?
Well, I would describe it with one sentence.
Okay.
That's one of the mottos of the film. It's never too late.
Amazing words, Walter. Thank you so much for giving us the time to talk about the film and your journey. And I hope to see you again, maybe in person or maybe again in another film or event.
Thank you. I am honored.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Bye bye.